lakes, and fields. Outdoor ramblings, rambling about the outdoors with Milton and O'Neill. Rambling about the outdoors with Milton and O'Neill. Well, hello, folks. I'm Milton Crabapple, and I'm here with my co-host O'Neill Williams. We want to welcome you to yet another episode of Outdoor Ramblings, where we talk about hunting and fishing and just basic rambling around outdoors. Ain't that right, O'Neill?
You betcha. And this show today is going to be one that the fishermen will carry with them the rest of their fishing career, and they can tell people about it. This is a good one.
That's good. This is going to be a good one. And you know, I'm a little disappointed today, O'Neill. I was thinking about something this morning, and I'm just kind of down in the dumps, to tell you the truth.
Oh boy!
You know, this is best I can calculate it. I was figuring it up on a piece of paper this morning. This is the 47th year in a row. 47 years straight in a row that People magazine has not named me the sexiest man of the year.
Oh, I'm so surprised. I don't know I don't know how to react. I'm so stunned.
I've done everything I know how to do. I'm about ready to give up on it.
Well, don't. No, now there may be you still got a chance.
Well, I'll keep plugging along.
Okay.
Anyhow, you got me excited telling me this was going to be a show that folks would carry the information from now. What is it?
Well, I got to tell you, you know, I because of the history on television and radio, a lot of people will approach me, and I get to go to Kiwanis clubs and things and talk. And my object, whether it's one person or whether it's a room of 50, I want them afterwards to walk out of the room saying, you know, I've got to try that, or I've got to keep that in mind. I'm glad we talked about that. They don't need to say, man, I love that O'Neill. It's the information. And I've got something today that's quite obvious, but nevertheless, you don't think of it. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. I'm going to give all the people listening now all over the Appalachian Mountains and these great big clear water reservoirs in the mountains and all over. Ready? And that is, these big reservoirs, about the 1st of June, they change completely. It's a different lake. You're going to go, if you went in early May and then you go in July, that's a different lake. Really?
And does that have anything to do with what they call turning over?
Well, no, that happens in December.
Oh, okay.
Okay. This is because all the bank activity is over, and all the game fish, certainly by the mid-June, have left the banks and they've gone to deep water.
Why do they do that?
Well, there's nothing on the bank for them. It's shallow. It's dangerous. They go out and they spend their time in the deep water places where there's stumps and trash and brush piles and standing trees. There's no reason for them to be shallow. Being shallow is to breed.
So it don't have nothing to do with the water temperature gets too hot and around the edges and they go down where it's cooler?
Well, a little bit, because the water is cooler if it's deeper. But basically, they go to the bank to have babies.
I see.
And after that, they go to deep water. All of them. Crappie, brim, spotted bass, largemouth, and everything. So if you approach your lake to where you go all during the springtime, and and this is a way I think you have to teach yourself, I'm going to go to Alatoona or Lanier, or I'm going to go to these big lakes in Tennessee, and I'm not going to throw to the bank all day. I promise myself I'm not going to throw to the bank. I remember my good friend Bill Dance. He told me one time, he said, it's funny, and he is the person you see on television that's Bill Dance, that's funny and falls around and everything, that's him. That's not an actor. That's the way Bill Dance is. So he told me one time, he said, if you're casting the bank, 98% of the fish are behind you.
Well, that makes sense.
And it's true. So if you adopt that attitude, no matter where you go, even to the same lake you've been, if you fish deep water instead of shallow water, you just made yourself a new lake.
Well, now, I've got a question now, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Now, nowadays, I reckon just about everybody that fishes on those big lakes has electronic devices on their boat to show them where the fish are. But now in the old days, when I was growing up fishing, we didn't have that kind of stuff.
Right.
We just had to, if we was going to fish the way you're talking about, we would just get off from shore. And of course, we didn't know to do that back in those days.
Yes.
But now, whatever happened to the old days of just fishing and wondering if there was a fish down there that was going to bite or not?
Well, that was just from being knowledgeable enough to make the change. You're right. The electronics demonstrate what I just said. Okay. But you have to know that's what you're doing. I know that before the electronics got so sophisticated and so great, I can remember going to my favorite lake. Well, my favorite lake, of course, was Lake Lanier because it was only like 30 miles away. But I can remember this time of the year and later in the year, one of my favorite plenty of my favorite points to fish in the springtime, where you cast up to the bank, you cast up to the timber, you cast up to the rocks and stumps. If this time of year you turn around and go shallow and throw out the point, that's where the fish are. They don't bass in spots. They aren't migratory like a striper. All they do is go from the shallow water where they are to the deep water where there's some stumps and trash and trees and maybe a ledge or a drop off, and that's where they spend the winter.
And a fish like a bass, he's now correct me if I'm wrong, but he's like a lot of folks. He's got a big mouth and a fat belly.
Yes.
And he likes to just lay around and wait till some food comes along so he can go up and down. He may lay up underneath a log all day long waiting on something to come along he can eat. He's not like a lot of fish that have to go out and forage and look for what they're going to eat.
Correct. And usually he's in a small school around maybe a submerged tree or something of that nature. I know one time when I used to fish tournaments, and believe me, I'm not, to anybody that's watching and listening, I'm not a bass master fisherman. Okay. I'm just an average fisherman, but I used to go a lot. All right. And I can remember finding a standing tree in the month of September, and the top of the tree was 30 feet deep. The bottom of the tree was over 60 feet deep. So this was a standing tree. In a tournament one day, I caught 27 bass in a row off that one tree. It was a school of fish in that tree, a school of fish that used to roam the banks during the bedding season. And they left and they spent their winter at that tree.
And they got hungry about the time you came along.
Well, there are a lot of other smaller critters that live in that tree too. There's all kind of crawfish and shad, and there's smaller bass. The big bass eat the small bass.
That's true. They do.
Yeah. And there's crappie in that tree at different levels. So if you do that and you adopt that to 50 different places in the lake, you just created a new lake for yourself.
That's true. You have. You have. That makes a lot of sense, O'Neill.
So you don't have to travel 300. I would suggest you go ahead and make the trip somewhere and get a new lake. But for you, for most guys, you just created a new lake for yourself.
You know, I've been fishing. I like to fish farm ponds.
Yeah.
Now that because I can just be sitting at home, and it'll be maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll say, I sure would love to have me several big old fried titty brim to eat for supper. And I'll just get in the car and truck and drive over to one of several ponds I got permission to fish in and go catch me a bunch of them and keep several of them to bring them home, cook them, clean them, and cook them right there on the spot. But now some of these farm ponds I've been fishing for I was figuring it up on one that I fished on Monday. I've been fishing that pond for about right at 65 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know the pond pretty well. It's about a 5-acre pond. But now I went over there Monday to fish, and this goes back to something you were talking about the structure and all. A pine tree had blown down in the wind, and it fell across over out into the lake.
Right.
Now, pond, it probably fell 25 feet out in there, but there was pine boughs and branches all sticking up. And this fellow was saying, I don't know how I'm going to get that out of the pond.
Oh, no, leave it there.
I said, no. I said, my heart lit up when I saw that tree blow down in there. I said,
you bet.
Said, really? He said, is it good to have it in there? I said, you're all darn right it is. I explained to him. So now I can't wait to go back over there fishing now because that's going to change that pond a little bit because on that particular side of the pond, the fishing ain't never been too good.
Right.
Because it's too clean over there. You get around places where you got alder bushes and willows and things hanging out over the water. You got lots of bugs and all kind of stuff falling into the water. So but this fella likes to keep it cleaned up around there. He don't like bushes to be around that. So I have to, there's places in that pond where you can go just walk right up there and catch 5 or 6 good bass on 5 or 6 cab. But then there's other places you can fish all day and you won't get a bite in that little pond. But going back to that structure you was talking about, they move off of that shoreline after the spawning's over with. For instance, talking about Lake Lanier, they don't just go out there and lay on the sandy bottom somewhere, do they?
No. They just go to a new home.
They go to a new home, and that home is around a log or a tree stump or a big rock or something out in there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know the last time I went fishing with Captain Mac Farr at Lanier, we were fishing plastic worms in December at 45 feet deep. Why? Because that's where the fish were.
That's where they are. Yes, sir.
And just a little tip, I'm always got a big mouth about tips. If you're fishing deep water like that, all right, man, this is great. I got fish. I'm getting bites. Yeah, I've put my line all the way down there with a plastic worm on it, and I got a bite. I set the hook, and he's on, and then he gets off. The natural tendency is to reel up real fast. Don't do that. Give yourself about 10 seconds of leaving that where it was. It could be that worm is still on that hook. And it could be that there are 5 or 6 or 7 bass that want to eat it. But this other one got to it first. If you leave the bait down there, you might catch another bass, and that does work.
Yeah, I'm sure it works. I'm always worried that if when I snatched it, that it's snatched it down and wadded it up around the end of my hook, and I got to straighten it back up again. I'm kind of obsessive about that thing being straight,
Yeah, I understand.
But to a hungry fish, if he's hot to eat something, it don't make a whole lot of difference, I don't believe.
No, he don't care. He's just down there, and he's looking for something to eat. Go ahead.
I always wondered about something too. Now, this may be a little bit off subject, but now that I got you here with me, I want to pick your brain a little bit. You throw out there sometimes, maybe if you're using a buzzbait or a spinnerbait, something that you're retrieving, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden you'll see. Well, I've seen the last three I've seen followed it up. They was following it up right behind it, but they chose not to bite it. Or some of them will come up there and they'll stop. They'll make a swipe at it, but at the last 3 inches of that charge, they'll veer off. And to start with, it amazes me how quick them rascals can recognize something ain't good to eat, because it's like avoiding a head-on collision when you're 10 feet away from somebody, you know. But anyhow, you don't know how many others have followed that thing.
Oh, man, yeah. Say, if it's a great demonstration lesson, if you did that and you saw 3 chasing it, it's likely that when you first threw it in and started back, there could have been a dozen chasing it.
That's true. They could have been. And you need to figure out why sometimes some little old change to make them, they're chasing it, but you want them to go ahead and grab it.
Well, I can make a suggestion. Ready?
Yes, sir.
Just change to a smaller bait.
Well, that might work.
Yeah,
sure.
If whatever they've been eating is probably smaller than your spinnerbait or your lure. If you change the size, then they'll likely bite it.
Well, now let me ask you this question too.
Okay.
Me and Dude was fishing Monday over at that pond I was telling you about, and we got over there. I said, I'm going to be over there at 6. I'll be over there before 6 o'clock in the morning. He said, well, it's just now starting to crack daylight. I said, I know, but I like to get there when it's still kind of dark and get that buzzbait out and throw it out there when it's just starting to be. You can't even see it when it hits the water. You got to listen for it.
Yes.
If you don't hear it hit the water, you know you threw it in the treetop.
Right.
But anyhow, I found an old buzzbait in there I wanted to use. It was kind of a small one. And the skirt on it had been in there a long time. It's kind of twisted up, and I got it straight, and I threw it out there, and I hooked a fish, and he got off. But when I pulled it in, the skirt was gone off of the buzzbait. So I just changed my line. Now, Dude said it. He said if you'd have just kept using it, you'd have probably caught just as many fish as you would have with that skirt on the thing. Because he said they're coming after that propeller buzzing in the water, and he said you reckon that would have been true?
Well, that could have been, absolutely could have been true. But I hate to try to top your story, but here's something to do under that situation, that being just started light and you're using a buzzbait and you're doing the right thing. Ready?
Yes, sir.
Use a trailer hook on the buzzbait. Had you put a trailer hook where the skirt is, or with the skirt, you would have caught that fish. Because when he bit the skirt, he would have also bit the trailer hook. So put a trailer hook on, and here's even a more refined sex suggestion. Turn the trailer hook down.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Turn it up or down.
Put the trailer hook down and put it with the skirt, and you would have probably caught that fish. These are just little things, and believe me, everybody that's listening, I didn't invent these things. Somebody else told me about them. Most of the time, tournament anglers that would catch more fish than me when I was with them. And they would do those little things that during the day would catch 2 fish more at 8 o'clock and 2 fish more at 11 o'clock and 2 fish more at 2 o'clock and then 4 o'clock. And then at the end of the day, they caught 8 more than I did, but because of just little things.
Little things, yeah. I reckon the only person that we all just learning what we had passed on to us. I reckon the only one that ever invented it from the start was William Shakespeare, I guess.
Probably.
He invented them rod and reels.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
and
sir.
And had a big company. Yeah.
He sure did. Yes, sir.
Oh, and I use a lot. I bet I've got 100 rods and reels over in the barn. And I'm gonna have work with the local sporting goods store, and we're gonna have a Saturday giveaway one day soon. And I'm gonna let them tell all their customers, the first 100 people that get there and mention Outdoor Ramblings, they're going to get a rod and reel.
Well, now that's a pretty good deal right there. Yes, sir. How many shotguns have you got?
2, and they're mine.
Well, dang.
Travis has already got all my shotguns.
He's already got. I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. When your grandchildren ask for a shotgun or a rifle, you give it to them.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. Yes, sir. Well, anyhow, O'Neill, you got anything else you want to throw out there? This has been a great show. I myself have learned a lot. I don't know about anybody else.
If we have time, do I have another minute?
All time in the world.
Okay. Let's say you got it figured out. The fish have left the bank. You've got a standing tree out there in deep water in the lake, and you know there's fish in it because you've caught them before. So you say, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out there and fish that tree. Pretty good idea. There's one other thing that you can do that may let you catch 3 or 5 or 6 fish instead of 1 or 2. Okay? Keep the sun in your face so that the shadow of your boat doesn't go over the tree. If the sun is at your back, the shadow of your boat goes over the tree. Does that spook fish? I don't know. But if you've got a choice as to where to put the boat, put it on the sunny side.
Well, now I'll say this with all confidence. The shadow will spook fish in a lot of occasions. Ain't no doubt about it. Sometimes I go with my friend, our good friend Henry Cowan. Me and Henry go fishing down on the Chattahoochee River and get out in them flats and pole around out in there, carp fishing, fly fishing. And I can tell you that when the shallower a fish is, I believe the easier he is to spook.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
He's like a deer that's out in the field versus in the thick woods. He's more vulnerable. But anyhow, and I can attest to this from a personal experience that with them carper in shallow water feeding, and you're out there, you're going to fly fish, and you decide you're going to make a few false casts. You're making a big mistake.
That's right.
Because they'll see the shadow of that fly line going overhead.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll spook them. That's how spooky they are in that shallow water. So you need to learn how to make one cast and get that fly. Because if you start getting out there whooping around like you're trying to get on a brim bed or something, you're going to spook all the fish.
Yes.
So I can attest, much less what the shadow of a boat.
Oh man, yeah. See, you put that shadow of the boat over the tree, you just cut your catch by 80%.
I'm sure that's a good point, O'Neill. I'm gonna
you like that?
Yeah, well, and I probably do that when I'm walking around the banks or fishing around the banks or paddling around in some of these farm ponds. I never have really thought of that,
Absolutely. And see, all this goes back to some degree to what we started with. That is, I'm going to fish a new lake today. It's the same place I always go, but I'm going to make it a new lake because I'm going to fish it differently.
That's a good point,
Yeah.
And talking about that sun, now that's the opposite of what I do when I go deer hunting.
Yes.
If I'm hunting a little corner of a pasture, I want the sun at my back. So if that deer's down there and he looks up in my direction, he's going to be blinded by the sun.
That's right. He'll just see a shadow, if anything at all. Otherwise, the sun's going to diminish his view. See, there you go. Of course,
you got to be up against a tree because you can get skylighted that way, with the sun behind you. So the sunlight plays into it just like everything else, don't it?
That's right. That little things like that is that we've been talking about turning the trailer hook down in the skirt and things of that nature. Those kind of things make Kevin Van Dam a champion fisherman. He catches all that are there. He doesn't catch 1 out of 10. He goes into a spot and he catches 8. And I fished with a few of those guys that are big time tournament fishermen. And we'll talk about that one day because they fish differently.
Well, I'm going to tell you something else about Kevin Van Dam and Bill Dance and Roland Martin and Jimmy Houston and all of them experts that won all these tournaments through all of these years.
Yes.
And become, like you, they become legends in the industry for everything they've done. And I'm going to tell you something that's a fact, and you can believe it or not. But they ain't a single one of them ever, right at the last minute before a tournament, when they're getting ready to get in the boat and getting ready to go fishing, not one of them has ever called me on the phone and asked for my advice.
See what they've been missing all these years? The next time I see Bill, which will be in a few weeks, I'll ask him, have you called Milton lately?
Well,
and I'm going to encourage him to give you a call.
I'm here. I'm here for them, but they just don't take advantage of it.
Well, they will. I'll get in touch with them.
This has been fun, O'Neill.
Oh, it always is.
I got to go do some plowing.
Yep.
So we're going to do this again. I'm enjoying doing these shows. So, folks, we appreciate you listening, appreciate you joining and being a part of this with us. And I want to remind you that wherever you go, wherever you do, always keep your nose to the wind and your eyes along the skyline. And remember this, if you hear somebody yell low bird, don't forget to duck.
All right. My last comment, as usual, like I do on the radio show, okay? If you're too busy to go fishing and take a child along with you, you're too busy. I'll see you.
Outdoor ramblings, rambling around the woodlands, the rivers, lakes, and fields. Outdoor ramblings, rambling about the outdoors with Milton and O'Neill. Rambling about the outdoors with Milton and O'Neill. Y'all come back now. You hear?